Deputy President. On a Friday night, just 10 days ago, in the suburbs of Melbourne, a young woman by the name of Arzu was riding her bike from her home in Moonee Ponds to Williamstown to visit a friend. While riding through Yarraville, just around the corner from my home in Footscray, Arzu was struck by a truck and died. She left behind two children, aged 6 and 2. It hit many in our community hard, including my family and myself. So 2 days after Arzu's death, I rode my bike with around 200 other Melburnians to finish her ride. It was an emotional event. For those of us who ride regularly, it was a moment of, it could have been me. For our friends and families, it could have been our loved ones. And indeed, my family quite often ride along the route that Arzu was on. And for those of us who would like to ride more, it was another reminder of what puts them off. Her death was preventable, but we can act in this place to make sure that it wasn't for nothing. While this government is still suffering from the hangover of the Abbott era and only wants to plough money into great big polluting toll roads, we can make a commitment right here to end this needless division. We can make a commitment to start building the infrastructure that will mean people riding their bikes don't need to put themselves at risk on the roads. Around 50 people a year in Australia die while riding their bikes. But with investment into proper infrastructure at local, state and federal level, we can give many more people the freedom to ride safely. Arzu's death shows that people who ride aren't that tabloid image of middle-aged men in lycra. They were ridiculed in Melbourne's Herald Sun this morning as cyclists encased in their ridiculous lycra condoms, propelled around city streets by a moral and environmental superiority. In contrast to this caricature, people who ride cut across every section of the community. We are young and old, fast and slow, rich and poor, and even though there's a gap between the number of women and men riding, the better the infrastructure, the closer to equality we get. Tonight, I want to share the story of just a couple of people who ride. Like 15-year-old Max from Yarraville. Max rides to school every day and back. And good on him. We hear a lot about childhood obesity and what we could be doing about it. We certainly hear a lot of accusations from the more conservative politicians and commentators about the so-called nanny state. So it's great that Max has got the freedom and the independence to be riding to and from school. Max's dad, Simon, approached me after Arzu's death. He described Max as a very responsible and experienced rider. But last November, Max was struck by a truck on a crossing at the corner of Geelong and Williamstown roads. He was able to make last-second evasive action, but still he was injured and he was taken by ambulance to the Royal Children's Hospital. Simon sent me an email of his son's bike, with a photo of his son's bike. It was completely mangled, and it's a complete miracle that Max wasn't killed. Simon said, "I was just so grateful that he was alive that I thought less about the wider issue of safety for all cyclists. Arzu's tragic death brought home this issue to me. I don't want another family to suffer as her family must be suffering right now." My son's story is an example of the dangers that face cyclists and the need to advocate for better infrastructure so that cyclists can use the roads safely. Then there is Jera, whose injuries were much worse. Jera was involved in a horrific crash with a truck on the corner of Sunshine Road and Geelong roads. Jera explained, "I was going around the corner and the truck came around the same corner, a fully loaded B-double. It turned way too sharp and the wheels actually went up over the curb. It hit me in the shoulder, caught my bike, and I fell sideways and got sucked under the truck. The truck didn't stop, it just kept going, but got stopped a couple of kilometres up the road with my bike still attached to it. Describing his injuries, Gerard said, "My leg was totally messed up. It was a full leg degloving and I broke my tibia, fibia and femur. I was in intensive care for a week and in hospital for 5 months. I had a lot of operations, it's hard to count how many. Every time they did dressing changes, they had to knock me out because it was so painful." Gerard will need ongoing medical treatment. And as if this trauma isn't enough, people who ride bikes are constantly subject to vitriolic attack. But it doesn't need to be this way. None of these crashes would have happened if we'd had world-class infrastructure that separates people on their bikes from cars and trucks. As someone who rides to work every day, I know that there is no better feeling than being on a bike. The wind in your hair, free from the constraints of traffic and pollution. But the only way we're going to give more people that opportunity is by giving them the freedom to ride safely. There are legislative changes we can make, like requiring side underrun protection rails on all heavy vehicles to stop bike riders and pedestrians from being thrown under the wheels. But critically, we need serious investment. The Greens want to see $250 million every year invested in bike infrastructure. It's cost-effective, healthier and would ease congestion and pollution, and I urge other parties to commit to similar levels of funding. For the sake of Max and Gerard and for Arzu and her family, we must work together in this place and with our state and our local counterparts to give people the freedom to ride.